Ted Cruz is going to try and explain away his corruption at the debate last night, and he faceplants.
The New York Times is reporting that you failed to properly disclose $1 million in loans from Goldman Sachs and Citibank during your Senate race. Your campaign says it was inadvertent. $1 million is inadvertent?
Well, Maria, thank you for passing on that hit piece on the front page of the New York Times. You know, the nice thing about the mainstream media, they don't hide their views. The New York Times a few weeks back had a columnist who wrote a column saying anybody but Cruz. That same columnist wrote a column comparing me to an evil demonic spirit from the movie It Follows that jumps apparently from body to body possessing people. So, you know, the New York Times and I don't exactly have the warmest of relationships. Now, in terms of their really stunning hit piece, what they mentioned is when I was running for Senate, unlike Hillary Clinton, I don't have masses of money in the bank, hundreds of millions of dollars. When I was running for Senate, just about every lobbyist, just about all of the establishment opposed me in the Senate race in Texas. And my opponent in that race was worth over $200 million. He put a $25 million check up from his own pocket to fund that campaign. And my wife Heidi and I, we ended up investing everything we own. We took a loan against our assets to invest it in that campaign to defend ourselves against those attacks. And the entire New York Times attack is that I disclosed that loan on one filing with the United States Senate that was a public filing, but it was not on a second filing with the FEC. Both of those filings were public, and yes, I made a paperwork error disclosing it on one piece of paper instead of the other, but if that's the best hit the New York Times has got, they better go back to the well.
That was a horrible answer. And that's one of those things where he's playing to the room and not to everybody watching on TV and everybody at home and normal people. So it's just like a knee-jerk reactionary, brush it aside response, but you don't really explain why it's wrong. And if anything, you made it worse because you're admitting that you took $1 million from Goldman Sachs. So this is horrible in every way. So let me break this down for you. First of all, his response is, me, New York Times, me. Ted, that's not a response. That's not a response outside of the room you're in. Okay? Everybody at home's like, okay, yeah, New York Times. We get it. It's a paper. It exists. What are you saying? The New York Times said it. You know what I'm saying? No, I don't know what you're saying. What are you saying? The New York Times. And then it's just New York Times. That's not an argument. It's effectively, the point he's making is effectively liberal media. Liberal media. If your go-to response every time there's any criticism of you is liberal media, you're an idiot. Because that means you have no real response, so you just deflect everything and say, well, it's just biased against me. Well, that means nobody can ever make a point against you about anything, even if it's factual, because you're just going to dismiss it as, well, it's just biased. Well, what if that's the truth? It's just biased against me. New York Times. New York Times. And then when he explains what actually happened, Ted, you idiot, you don't get it. People who are, even in the room, the people who are sitting there, they don't want to hear about FEC and disclosure and transaction and election law and what I filed with the paperwork with the this and the that. All they're hearing is, I took the money. I took the money from Goldman Sachs. I took it was actually $500,000 for himself and his campaign. And then his wife, who worked for Goldman Sachs, got another $500,000. Now, we don't know if that money went just to the family as a loan, or if they took that money and also poured it into the campaign. But either way, it's bad. So that's where they get the $1 million number from. And what Ted Cruz is doing here, he doesn't even realize it, is he's admitting that he took the money. As he's explaining, but the paperwork and the way I filed it and this and that, and liberal media, New York Times. It's not an argument, Ted, and you just admitted you took the money. So all of your, I'm anti-establishment, I'm Ted Cruz, me, I look out for the little guy, me. Apparently not, because you took, you're taking $1 million from Goldman fucking Sachs.